What if I told you that fallen angels once walked among humans, breeding a race of giants that nearly destroyed civilization? What if these weren't just myths, but documented events that powerful institutions have tried to hide for centuries? In 1947, a shepherd boy stumbled upon ancient scrolls in the caves of Qumran. Among them was the Book of Enoch, a text so controversial it was banned from the Bible. This book doesn't just tell stories. It names the fallen angels, describes their forbidden technologies, and reveals prophecies about our modern world that are eerily coming true right now. The question isn't whether this happened. The question is, why don't they want you to know about it? And more importantly, are the Nephilim returning? Stay with me, because what you're about to discover will change everything you thought you knew about human history. Let's start with a man who walked with God and never died. Enoch wasn't just another biblical character. According to Genesis, he lived 365 years, and then he was no more because God took him away. He didn't die like other humans. He was transported directly to heaven, an honor shared by only one other person in the Bible, Elijah. But here's what most people don't know. Enoch was the great-grandfather of Noah. And before his mysterious departure, he was given a cosmic tour of the universe, shown the secrets of creation, and witnessed events that would shape the destiny of humanity. The Book of Enoch, written thousands of years ago, contains his testimony. For centuries, it was considered scripture by early Christians and Jews. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church still includes it in their Bible today. Yet most Western churches removed it, calling it apocryphal, too dangerous, too revealing, too controversial. Why? Because it tells a story that challenges everything we've been taught. Enoch describes advanced astronomical knowledge that shouldn't have existed in ancient times. He details the movements of celestial bodies, the calendar systems, and cosmic laws with precision that seems impossible for his era. He speaks of chambers in the sky, dimensions beyond our perception, and realms where fallen angels are imprisoned, awaiting judgment. But most disturbing of all, he reveals what happened when divine beings broke the ultimate law. Genesis chapter 6 gives us just a glimpse. The sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days.
That's it!
The Bible mentions it and moves on. But Enoch, he names names. He provides details. He exposes the conspiracy. According to the Book of Enoch, 200 angels, called the Watchers, descended upon Mount Hermon. They were led by a powerful angel named Semjaza, along with others like Azazel, Ramiel, and Kokobiel. These weren't minor spiritual beings. These were high-ranking members of the heavenly host. They made a pact, binding themselves with mutual curses, knowing what they were about to do was forbidden. They knew the consequences would be catastrophic, and they did it anyway. These Watchers took human women as wives and produced offspring, the Nephilim. But these weren't normal children. They were giants, hybrids with supernatural abilities and insatiable appetites. Ancient texts describe them as ranging from 15 to 30 feet tall, possessing superhuman strength and violent temperaments. The Nephilim began consuming everything. First the produce of the earth, then animals, and finally, according to Enoch, humans themselves. They became cannibals, tyrants who enslaved humanity and ruled through terror. But the corruption didn't stop there. The fallen angels began teaching humanity knowledge that was meant to remain hidden. Azazel taught men to make weapons of war swords, knives, shields, and armor. He taught women cosmetics and beautification, which might sound harmless until you understand the context. These were tools of seduction and vanity that corrupted human nature. Semjaza taught enchantments and root cutting, the beginnings of sorcery and pharmaceutical manipulation. Amaros taught counter-enchantments. Barachiel taught astrology. Kokobiel taught the knowledge of constellations. Ezekiel taught cloud reading. Arachiel taught earth signs. Shamsiel taught sun signs. Sariel taught lunar courses. This wasn't education, it was corruption. Technologies and knowledge systems that humanity wasn't ready to handle were being weaponized, creating a civilization built on forbidden foundations. The result? Complete moral collapse. Genesis tells us, "The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time." The world had become so corrupt, so violent, so twisted by the Nephilim and fallen angels that God decided on a radical solution: total reset, a flood. But here's what should terrify you. Genesis 6:4 says the Nephilim were on the earth, and also afterward. After the flood. How did they survive? And where are they now? Before the flood, Enoch was shown visions of judgment, not just for his time, but for ours. The Book of Enoch describes multiple judgments. The first was the imprisonment of the 200 watchers who descended. According to the text, archangels Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel bound these fallen angels in valleys and pits beneath the earth, where they would remain until the final judgment. Enoch describes visiting these prisons during his heavenly journey, dark, fiery places where rebellious angels await their fate. He speaks of 7 mountains, chambers of punishment, and dimensions where time operates differently. The Nephilim giants themselves were destroyed in the flood, but Enoch reveals something chilling: their spirits didn't die. Because they were hybrid creatures, part divine, part human, they had no place in either heaven or the grave. Instead, they became demons, spiritual entities roaming the earth, seeking embodiment and causing destruction. This explains why ancient cultures worldwide tell stories of evil spirits, demons, and malevolent entities that plague humanity. These aren't metaphors. According to Enoch, they're the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. But Enoch's prophecies don't stop in the ancient world. He describes future ages, including what scholars believe refers to our current era. He speaks of a time when wickedness would return to pre-flood levels, when violence would fill the earth again, when humanity would possess knowledge and technologies that would lead to their own destruction, when people would reject God completely, living as if heaven doesn't exist. Enoch chapter 93 outlines what's called the Apocalypse of Weeks, a prophetic timeline dividing history into 10 periods. According to this timeline, we're currently in the 8th or 9th week, approaching the final judgment. The characteristics of this age: mass deception, corruption of justice, economic slavery, persecution of the righteous, and the return of forbidden knowledge on a massive scale. Sound familiar? But there's more. Enoch prophesies about a specific moment when the elect would be revealed, when a remnant of humanity would stand against the darkness, and when final judgment would come, not just upon fallen angels, but upon human institutions and systems that have partnered with evil. He describes cosmic signs, disturbances in the heavens, the sun, moon, and stars behaving abnormally. He speaks of earthquakes, floods, and fire falling from the sky. He details social collapse, famine, and wars that would precede the coming of the Messiah and the establishment of God's kingdom on earth. The early Christians believed these prophecies. The Book of Jude in the New Testament directly quotes Enoch, calling him a prophet. Early church fathers like Tertullian, Irenaeus, and Clement of Alexandria reference the Book of Enoch as legitimate scripture. So why was it removed? Why was this prophetic book, endorsed by biblical writers themselves, considered too dangerous for the average believer? For over 1,000 years, the Book of Enoch was lost to the Western world. Some scholars believed it had been completely destroyed. Others thought it was merely a legend, referenced but never real. Then, in 1773, a Scottish explorer named James Bruce travelled to Ethiopia and returned with 3 copies of the book, preserved in the Gurz language by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. The Western world was shocked. The book they thought was lost had been carefully guarded by African Christians for centuries. But the real bombshell came in 1947. Among the Dead Sea Scrolls discovered in Qumran caves were multiple fragments of the Book of Enoch in Aramaic and Hebrew, the original languages. This proved the book existed in the 1st century and earlier, that Jewish communities considered it authoritative, and that Jesus and his disciples would have known its contents. This discovery created a problem for mainstream religious institutions. If the Book of Enoch was legitimate ancient scripture, why was it removed? What were they afraid people would discover? Some theologians argue it was excluded because it couldn't be verified as written by Enoch himself. Others claim its cosmology didn't align with later church doctrine. But critics suggest something more sinister. The book reveals too much about the supernatural reality behind human history. It exposes the names and ranks of fallen angels. It describes their ongoing influence over earthly governments and systems. It reveals that spiritual warfare isn't metaphorical, it's literal, strategic, and hierarchical. It suggests that human institutions can be demonically infiltrated and controlled. For organizations seeking to maintain authority and control, this information is dangerous. It empowers individuals to recognize spiritual manipulation. It provides a framework for understanding evil that goes beyond personal sin to systemic corruption orchestrated by non-human intelligence. Consider this. Every ancient culture has flood stories. Every ancient culture has stories of gods mating with humans and producing giants. Every ancient culture describes a time when divine beings taught forbidden knowledge. The Sumerians called them Anunnaki. The Greeks called them Titans. The Hindus speak of Asuras. The Norse had the Nephilim equivalent in their own sagas. What if these aren't different mythologies, but different cultural memories of the same events? The Book of Enoch provides the Jewish perspective on this global phenomenon, and it's the only text that treats it as historical fact, while also providing prophetic context. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. If you understand what Enoch recorded, you start seeing patterns in our modern world that are deeply disturbing. Remember what the fallen angels taught. Weapons technology, genetic manipulation, pharmacological control, sorcery, celestial knowledge used for power, and systems of vanity and seduction. Look at our world today. We have weapons capable of destroying civilization multiple times over. We're editing human DNA through CRISPR technology. We're creating human-animal hybrids in laboratories. Pharmaceutical companies control health through chemical manipulation. We have occult practices repackaged as self-help and spirituality. We use astronomical knowledge for satellite warfare and surveillance. Our entire culture is built on image, seduction, and external modification. We're essentially repeating the pre-flood world using modern terminology. Some researchers go further, suggesting that alien abduction phenomena, reports of hybridization programs, and UFO encounters aren't extraterrestrial, they're interdimensional. These are the same fallen angels and demonic entities, using technology and deception to continue their ancient agenda. The goal: corrupt human genetics again, create a post-human species, prepare humanity for the acceptance of a hybrid ruler, what prophecy calls the Antichrist. This might sound like conspiracy theory until you examine what global leaders are actually saying. The World Economic Forum openly discusses transhumanism, merging human biology with artificial intelligence. They speak of a fourth industrial revolution, where humans will be augmented, edited, and enhanced. They talk about a coming era where privacy, autonomy, and even human nature itself will be radically transformed. Klaus Schwab, founder of the WEF, wrote, "The fourth industrial revolution will lead to a fusion of our physical, digital, and biological identity." Yuval Noah Harari, advisor to the WEF, has stated, "Humans are now hackable animals." The idea that humans have this soul or spirit, and they have free will, that's over. These aren't fringe figures, these are influential leaders shaping global policy. Meanwhile, Religious institutions that removed the Book of Enoch remain silent. They've stripped believers of the framework needed to understand what's happening. They've reduced spiritual warfare to a personal, internal struggle, ignoring the cosmic, systemic dimensions that Enoch revealed. But there's another side to this. Enoch doesn't just describe corruption, he describes resistance. He speaks of the righteous and the elect, people who would recognize the deception, refuse to participate in corrupted systems, and maintain their humanity even when surrounded by post-human hybrids. He describes a remnant who would preserve true knowledge, live by divine law, and await the coming intervention of God. This is why the Book of Enoch is being rediscovered now, not by institutions but by individuals seeking truth. In the age of information, ancient wisdom is becoming accessible again. People are reading these texts for themselves and recognizing the patterns. So we come to the ultimate question: are the Nephilim returning? Jesus himself referenced the days of Noah when describing the end times. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. He wasn't just talking about wickedness, he was talking about specific conditions. The days of Noah were characterized by hybrid corruption, forbidden knowledge, supernatural interference, and a humanity that had become so twisted that judgment was the only solution. Enoch's prophecies describe a final age when these conditions return, when the boundaries between human and non-human blur again, when technology becomes a tool of spiritual corruption, and when fallen angels make their final move. But here's the crucial part. Enoch also describes the final judgment. He speaks of the return of the Messiah, not as a humble teacher, but as a cosmic warrior accompanied by 10,000 of his holy ones. He describes the opening of the prisons where fallen angels are held, their final sentencing, and their eternal punishment. He details the destruction of earthly systems built on corruption, the vindication of the righteous who suffered under these systems, and the establishment of a new heaven and earth where righteousness dwells. This isn't mythology. This is a prophecy that has been consistent for thousands of years, preserved through multiple texts and traditions, and increasingly relevant as we watch our world transform. The Book of Revelation, the final book of the Christian Bible, echoes Enoch's visions. It describes beasts rising from the sea and earth, symbolic of corrupted governments and religious systems. It speaks of a dragon giving power to these beasts, the same Satan that Enoch identifies as the leader of the fallen angels. It describes a mark that controls buying and selling economic slavery through biological modification. It details cosmic signs, plagues, and judgments that parallel Enoch's prophecies. But Revelation also promises the same outcome: the return of Christ, the binding of Satan and his angels, the judgment of human and angelic rebels, and the restoration of creation. For those who understand the Book of Enoch, Revelation isn't cryptic. It's a continuation of the same narrative. The question for each person watching this is, what side of this story are you on? You might be wondering, why does this matter? Whether these stories are literal or symbolic, what difference does it make in my daily life? Here's why it matters. Your worldview determines your choices. If you believe we're just biological accidents in a meaningless universe, you'll make certain decisions. If you believe we're spiritual beings in a cosmic war between good and evil, you'll make very different decisions. The Book of Enoch reveals that history has a moral arc, that evil is real and organized, that humans are caught in a larger conflict, and that your choices have eternal consequences. It means that when you're pressured to compromise your values, accept dehumanizing systems, or adopt technologies that alter your fundamental nature, you have a framework for saying no. You understand what's really at stake. It means that when you see corruption in institutions, you're not naive. You recognize spiritual warfare playing out through human systems. You can resist without surprise or despair. It means that when you feel overwhelmed by the darkness in the world, you have hope. Because Enoch saw the end of the story. The righteous are vindicated. Evil is judged. God intervenes. Humanity is restored. This isn't about fear, it's about awareness. The fallen angels and their human allies operate through deception. They need you to be ignorant, confused, and compliant. They need you to believe this is all normal, inevitable, progressive. But when you know the playbook, you can't be easily fooled. Enoch walked with God in a corrupt generation and was preserved. Noah built an ark when everyone thought he was crazy and survived the judgment. The early Christians followed an obscure Jewish carpenter and transformed the world. History shows that God always preserves a remnant, people who refuse to bow to the system, who maintain their humanity and divinity regardless of the cost. The question isn't whether the Nephilim are returning. The question is, will you recognize them when they do? Will you resist the seduction of forbidden knowledge and corrupted technology? Will you maintain your humanity when post-humanism becomes the norm? These are the choices of our generation. The Book of Enoch was hidden for a reason. It was removed from Scripture because it gives believers too much knowledge, too much power, too much clarity about the nature of evil. But in this age of information, the hidden things are being revealed. Ancient prophecies are becoming accessible. People are waking up to patterns that have been concealed for centuries. Enoch walked with God and was taken to heaven. He saw things humans weren't meant to see. He was shown the fate of angels and the destiny of humanity. And he wrote it all down, not for his generation alone, but for ours. The Nephilim were real. Their corruption brought judgment. Their spirits still operate. And the conditions that brought God's intervention before are being recreated now, deliberately, systematically, globally. But just as Enoch found favor with God in a wicked generation, so can you. Just as Noah was warned and preserved, so can you be. Just as a remnant has always survived to carry truth into the next age, so can you be part of that remnant. This isn't about religion or denomination. This is about recognizing reality, spiritual reality, cosmic reality, prophetic reality. The war is real, the stakes are eternal, and you're not a bystander. You're a participant, whether you realize it or not. So what will you do with this knowledge? Will you dismiss it as ancient superstition? Or will you recognize that maybe, just maybe, our ancestors weren't primitive and ignorant? Maybe they were warning us about something that never really went away. The choice, as always, is yours. But now you know. And you can't unknow it. The prophecies of Enoch are unfolding. The question is, are you ready?